Here's the deal with Simone Biles. And if you're listening to the show or listen to us on YouTube or getting us however you get us, thanks for listening. I think that there's so many layers to this topic, but I will say this. She's not a quitter, but she did disappoint her team. Both things could be correct. I'm not going to call her a quitter. That's an extreme term. If you know her past and to reach her athletic level, the greatest gymnast of all time, most medals of any gymnast ever, as far as Olympics. She's been an all-around Olympic champion, won a lot of Olympics, world championships, every discipline. I mean, she's still at. No, I did the whole thing with. Is she the greatest of all? I don't like doing greatest of all times when you're still active, but she is in that very short list. She's right there. So she's not a quitter in that regard, but she did bow out of the competition. I look at it this way. If you show up to the competition and you're competing, you have to do your best to try to finish it out. And I look at this differently in a way from Naomi Osaka with the mental illness, and that's where we're dealing with that also. If when I first heard about it, and we have these time delay with the Olympics this year, at least we being in the United States and it take place in Japan, so there's a delay. So I heard about her dropping out or leaving the team competition, and they said with a foot injury. And when you hear that, you're like, okay, we're used to hearing that from athletes. They got injured, they can't compete. It's sports. You can't if you're physically unable to continue and play. That's the way things work out. But then we heard about is some mental illness, and then she did the press conference, and she brought up that statement with the mental illness, which you have to be very, very careful with in bringing that up. When did the mental illness for her? When did that become the big issue for her? We saw her in the preliminary rounds not be at the top of her abilities by her standards, where she stumbled on a few dismounts and was not performing at the elite level that we're used to seeing her performing at. That was a preliminary of the team competition. Then she did the first rotation of the team competition and stumbled during that routine. Was that the point where she felt that mentally she was not there and not able to compete? You have to question if she was able to stick those landings and do things at a high level, would the mental illness be in her periphery as far as everything going on? That's where you have to really be careful saying the mental illness. And I bring up Osaka because she did not participate in the events, whether it was Wimbledon or the French Open. She did not participate in those events before they took place. So she withdrew herself from the competition before it began. And that's, I think, that's an approach to things. But once you sign up for something and you're in it to compete, I think you have to find a way to finish it out. And I've heard the argument as well, it's gymnastics, and if you're not 100% there, you can really hurt yourself, and that can include life-altering injuries. I understand that, but I think a lot of sports have that same situation. You can't every sport that we from some are more severe than others, but a football player, a hockey player, a basketball player, whenever they step onto that court, they can have an injury that is life altering in a bad way. Some more likely than others, some are more contact sports than others, obviously. I'm not naive in that regard. And gymnastics is an extremely physical sport. Physically, and you're doing flips and moves that if you land incorrectly, it can You can injure things like backs and necks and things that can really, really be bad for your lifestyle the rest of your life. So I get all of that and all of and her perspective in that regard. So I'm not saying that she's a quitter because I think to reach that level and to have all the success she's had, that's not a quitter in that regard. Now, she have a bad day, absolutely. But I also don't want to say that it's heroic and that she's a hero and that she's a strong person. No, being strong-willed would have been finishing that competition in that way. And she's not a hero. Look, and I think and that's where it gets very disappointing seeing and I'm getting disappointed on her criticism, but here's the criticism on her praise. The fact that we're using those terms and that she's an inspiration and things like that. Look, I enjoy sports. It's a life that I professionally pursue and have made money off of and everything along those lines. But I literally I watch the news and see frontline workers dealing with COVID, whether it's doctors, police officers, firefighters, school teachers, putting their lives literally on the line with COVID and just other high risk positions. I come from a military family. All of us do. We all have military members in our families. And them putting themselves on the line for our country and defending it. Those are heroes. Those are inspirations. Those are people that put it on the line for protect us against threats, foreign and domestic. That's when I think of heroes, service people, community workers, things like that. Someone doing an athletic event should not be in those same terms as those people. That's not the way it works. Sports are important. Sports are something that we all follow and enjoy. But let's keep a perspective on this. And if you're going to say that this can inspire other young people or older people in general, not, I mean, she's young. She's in her 20s, so she's a younger person. But if this is going to inspire people to look at their mental health and look at where they are in life and things like that, yes, I mean that's a good thing. I mean awareness is important, and if someone can say if Simone Biles can acknowledge her mental issues and competition, that can be some maybe I can do that, and if that saves some lives or puts people in better positions in life. Sure, I mean that's nothing to ignore. You have to acknowledge that. But the hero worship in this regard from people and a lot of non-sports fans, and I'm calling out and this is kind of goes to the criticism as well, or the critique of the criticism. She is being used, and that is the appropriate word, as a platform or an excuse for people to express their opinions in non-sports related issues. And I go to my MSNBC people, Fox News, Newsmax, CNN, all of these political people that think she's supposed to be a microcosm on one side of this generation and I say her generation, and people, millennials, that's always the buzzword. Whenever I hear someone say, oh, these millennials, you know where they're going with that. She is a representation of millennials and the quick culture and the woke culture, and she represents this generation of soft people, the wussification of society, and all this other stuff. No, she's not. Don't do that. Don't put her in that box. Don't put her in that category. I look the way she's worked on and off the gymnastics arena, and the way she's grown up and things she's gone through. That's not a soft person at all. She's a very strong-willed, physical individual with her sports and mentally to get to that level and the things she's overcome. You can research it. I don't want to go into her personal deal off the gymnastics mats, but she's gone through some things. So I'm not going to ever say that she is soft or a wuss or a quitter in that regard. And you have some of these. conservative agendaed people, politically conservative, in the sports realm too, and in the Fox News is in that regard, that are trying to use her as a vehicle for just the downfall of young people in society, downfall of this woke era of things going on. No, don't do that. But then you have the counter response, and I think you do have to acknowledge that she's a black woman, and I say this as a black man. A lot of times you're very protective of people who are critical of people in your race or your gender. And it goes both ways with her, race and gender. A lot of black people like look at the criticism of Biles, and there is a undercurrent of probably some, you're going to have racism and sexism, any critique of a public figure, especially like her, in this forum. So I think you see a lot of black people that are, or minorities, that see the criticism of her and think and see the racism in it, and are very protective of that, because we've seen that before from a lot of critiques of a lot of people that are with racism. So you can't ignore that. And then with women, and I'm not a woman, so I never I never put myself in that spot. I put myself in the position as a black man, but I'll never do that as a woman. But observing, just from being raised by a black woman and black women in my family and friends and everything like that, I think people, when they see the criticism of Biles, of Simone Biles, they look at it as like they're picking on a woman. And a lot of women and men and people in general don't like to see that be done. Now, if you want to criticize some on the field or on the court stuff, in the athletic competition, okay, that's one thing. But when you go across the line, as I mentioned, it's turned into this agenda against, she's representation of young black women and how they don't do this and are soft and weak. They're gonna get that, the counter of that. You're gonna have that argument as well, or not, or defending of her. So that's when it becomes just this big schmaz of confusion and everything that's going on. My opinion, as I said, she's not a quitter, but she did eliminate herself from the competition, of the team competition. And that's where you get a mix up as well with Osaka. And every situation is different. And some, there's some similarities, some differences. She's a tennis player of individual sport. So if she's letting anyone down, it's really herself. In this scenario, with this, in this gymnastics competition, gymnastics is a very individual sport. You go out for yourself and things like that. But she was part of a team competition, and the team won the silver medal. But and they did what, because in essence they could not eliminate the lowest score, because she was the lowest score every time, because she was not doing the competition. So you have the four gymnasts or the five gymnasts, whatever it normally is, and you can eliminate the lowest score out of that. So every score from those gymnasts counted, and they did a very good job of the United States getting the silver medal. Now the rest of these competitions, they're all individuals. Like you had all around with Suni Lee winning it last night for the United States. That's individual stuff, and then they're going to do the individual disciplines, from the the balance beam to the uneven bars, the floor, the vault. We all know the disciplines. Those are individual competitions. So if Biles can participate in that, that's an individual stuff. That's on her. So she's not necessarily letting a team down and stuff like that. But I think that it's, you can have it both ways. That she should be critiqued for pulling herself out of the middle of a competition. Not even before the competition started. If she did that, I think it'd be different. The team can adjust and try to. Now she couldn't be replaced. Gotta acknowledge that. But the team could have made adjustments, I guess, in that regard, maybe mentally or with their routine or their setup. So she didn't do it before the competition. I think that would have been a fair compromise as far as the things go. But once the competition starts, you have to find a way to finish it out, I think, in my opinion. And that's where she had the mishap there. But does this alter her career or make, you can't take away all those previous achievements? No. But I think that when it's the Olympics and we watch these certain sports every 4 years, and that's where it becomes just you get, I look at stuff strictly on the field as much as I can. But when you get people that don't watch sports consistently, and they don't, because the turn, you could tell they're not sports fans, and they try to act, now you could not be a sports fan and watch the sport and try to learn about it and enjoy it, and that's cool. But when you try to act like a sports expert and you not don't know what you're talking about, I don't like that stuff. So that's my thoughts on Biles and everything that was going on there. As far as the rest of the Olympics and competitions going on, I'm really enjoying it. I've watched a lot of handball. The table tennis has been fun. Badminton, archery. I'm watching baseball right now, United States and Israel. I know United States already won this match, but I'm still watching a little bit of it. Women's soccer, very competitive match between Netherlands and the United States. The United States was able to advance in women's soccer into the semifinals. They're going to face Canada, their CONCACAF rival, but the penalty kicks was fun. Megan Rapinoe with the match winning penalty kick to get things along that way. I just enjoy watching all these different sports, ones that I would never even think of doing, like swimming and water polo, to things like archery, where I'm like, you know what, I could pick up a bow and arrow and try that, to other random things, rowing and the cycling, BMX racing, and the diving. I just like watching all the different sports. And as I said on the last show, it doesn't have to be United States dominated for me to watch it. I don't mind that South Korea is dominant in archery, or in table tennis, the Chinese do really well in that, or that in team handball, there's not even a United States team in the men's and women's side. I just like watching sports in the competition. Some more than others. Swimming, I can kind of swimming is kind of monotonous to me. I don't really mess around too much with it. But and even the table tennis, I could be kind of, and badminton, those could be monotonous as well at times. But I really dig it. Now I watch judo and wrestling, and I can see that being monotonous to people in taekwondo. But I follow those. I follow mixed martial arts, so I see the translation in those disciplines. So I kind of know what to look for, a little bit. Weightlifting is intriguing to me. Just lifting all of that weight. I like to lift weights myself, so that's fun to see. But when I say when it comes to the Olympics, enjoy it. Take the ride. Don't Obviously, if there's a United States competitor in there, I want to see him do well and I want to see them win. But if a United States person doesn't win, it's okay. Like I was watching the freestyle race between Kate Ledecky, the United States swimmer, and the team is from Australia, and it was a really good race. And team is from Australia was able to win that. It was one of the freestyles. I want to say the 200 freestyle, but the fact that it was a really good race, really competitive, came down to the last few strokes, and the American didn't win, but it was okay. I want to see. I was rooting for Ledecky to win because she's American and she's a really good athlete, but she didn't win, and that's okay. But you'll have people say that, oh, she lost, and I'll say this another thing as well. Just making the Olympics is a freaking good accomplishment. I've heard people say, oh, they settled for silver or they got the bronze. Darn it, to be the second or third best person in the world in your sport is amazing. Never go. I'll never get that. Now, yes, the person who wins the gold medal and is the best. That's awesome, and they should be commended and given all the props and accolades that you can ever give somebody for doing that. But to settle for the silver, or to, oh, they got the bronze, they finished third. These athletes put years, lifestyles, their entire lives, they're competing in these sports. And yes, did they want to win the gold? Absolutely. And especially if you are good enough to be in the medal race, you want to win the gold. But I'm sure all these athletes at the moment, yes, they got the silver, they didn't, or the bronze, they didn't, or even finish fourth or fifth, they didn't win the medal. But I think you look back later, I think they'll be very proud to say I was one of the top two or three athletes in the world at that time in that sport. You got to be appreciative of that. So I don't see that when people talk about that, oh, they got the silver, there's major disappointment, or they got the bronze, they must be kicking themselves. No, I don't think that at all. I think it's the complete opposite of that.